So much to Central Coast writers, to all of you. It was so fun to hear your writing samples just now. It was lovely. And to Elizabeth Stacy for inviting me to speak here at the Center for Spiritual Awakening, a beautiful place, and for everyone for being here tonight. I'm going to try to have this here. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the process of writing and researching my second book, Under the Stars, How America Fell in Love with Camping, and how the book ended up getting published by Henry Holt and Company. And I thought I'd start out by talking about how I just got published in the first place. So I need to sort of back up in time a little bit, because I know a lot of you are thinking about that. And also talk about the research that went into the second book. And then I have a slideshow for you, for everyone who's interested in doing research for your nonfiction. Actually, a lot of research can go into fiction too. And I find that for me, one of the big challenges of research is I can just nerd out on research for so long, and I love it so much that it's kind of easier than writing. It's so fun to spend a long time in a database or in a musty old library that you can actually forget to go back to the little book that you're neglecting. So the reason I wanted to talk about getting my first book published is because I wouldn't have gotten the second book published without it. So I thought I'd just do a little prehistory. So basically, for a very long time, I was an unhappily unpublished author. I mean, that was for most of the time. I've been trying to get published since I was in high school. And so just failing since I was in high school. When I was in high school, I wrote a really silly fantasy novel called The Wind Book, which was indeed very long-winded. I think it was 1,000 pages long. And I still trip on pages of it in my garage. I will be cleaning up and then, oh my God, there's a piece of The Wind Book. It was just really terrible. It was kind of a Lord of the Rings pastiche. And then I wrote some other manuscripts that never got published. And for a while, I lived in this kind of granny unit, and there was this shed that was full of all my unpublished manuscripts, and rain would fall in the shed, and then mushrooms would sprout out of it's just humiliation after humiliation. And then I wrote an illustrated piece of fan fiction once about do you remember the Ewoks from Star Wars, the little fuzzy fellows from Star Wars? So I wrote a book about that. And then I actually sent a copy of the book I was so above board, I sent a copy of it to Lucasfilms to see what they would say. And they said, "You cannot write this book." I got a sternly worded warning from their legal department. Just this little stupid book that a high school student, and they had a cease and desist order, and I was like 16 years old, and I thought that I was cooked, that I was never going to be published. So the big change for me was this adventure I took in my wayward 20s. Way back in the 1990s, I hiked the entire Pacific Crest Trail. It's a trail that goes from Mexico to Canada, 2,650 pitiless miles through California, Oregon, Washington. Many of you are familiar with a book called Wild by Cheryl Strayed. Yes, and so anyhow, this was a camping adventure that took place way before Under the Stars. And it was during the 1990s, it was a really crazy time to hike the Pacific Crest Trail. If you go out there now, everybody's just so wired up. Everyone's got these amazing batteries that keep their devices powered up, and they're basically just online out there. They've got satellite technology. It's unbelievable. But when I did it, cell phones existed, kind of, but remember cell phones in the early 1990s where almost no one had them, and there were these, great, like a brick, not just a brick, but then there'd be like an antenna hanging off it. It was just this huge thing, like a size of a baby. And so the problem with those cell phones is there was almost no telecommunications infrastructure. So basically, I didn't have a cell phone, and my girlfriend didn't have a cell phone. And so when you hiked out on the Pacific Crest Trail, it was like you're stepping off the size of the world. I mean, you were all on your own, and which is great if you had survival experience. But we had no idea what we're doing. So the cactus eaters is these two clueless suburbanites go out there, and we just got it handed to us by the Pacific Crest Trail. It really roughed us up. Anyhow, the original version of this book, the original unpublished book, was just like all of my original first works, was too long. I think it was like 900 pages long or something, which is fine if you're Homer who's writing the Odyssey. But for me, or James Joyce. So I was able to get this was something that was very distressing that I'm sure some of you know, but I did get a literary agent for this, but they couldn't sell it. And I thought, oh my goodness, I had no idea. I thought if you got a literary agent, you're set. But they couldn't sell this elephantine version of the Cactus Eaters. I even got rejections from publishing houses that seemed to be like operating out of people's basements. I got rejected by a publishing company called Sasquatch Books. I mean, it just seems like it's just one person who just, I don't like your book. Everybody hated me. It was horrible. So it was an incredibly discouraging time. And once again, I thought I was cooked. I thought I'd never be published. At that point, I was in my 20s, and so it was way too early to concede defeat. You should never concede defeat in this business, but I had no way of knowing that. And this will sound silly now, but a lot of the publishing houses at that time, see, publishing is so fickle. They told me, we can't sell this book because nobody would ever buy a book about hiking a long distance trail like the Pacific Crest. And then a few years later, Bill Bryson has this little book called A Walk in the Woods about the Appalachian Trail. Wild actually came out after the Cactus Eaters. But anyway, so publishers didn't know what to make of this thing. And publishers are very risk averse, as I'm sure a lot of you know. It's it's really strange because so many books come out. There's a flood of books. There's more books, nonfiction books and novels than we could possibly read if you devoted your entire life to reading them. And yet it's really hard to get published. So, which is strange. Publishers are really risk averse, and they didn't want to take a chance on a book about a long trail, and they didn't want to take a chance on me. Most published books lose money. I think a lot of you know this, but most published books actually lose money for publishers. It's a very strange business. I think that publishers are almost like theatrical producers in the sense that they operate on what I think of as a blockbuster model, where they're just hoping and praying that even though most books don't do well, there'll be that one book on the list that will be a mega seller that will subsidize the rest of the list, which is a very kind of a silly way of doing business when you think about it. But it explains why they're so kind of paranoid. That's why you'll see publishing houses bringing out memoirs from very famous people. You're wondering what they would even have to say. Billie Eilish, for instance, with the idea that those people will help keep the lights on too, right? So, but a big part of it was my fault because the book wasn't ready to be published, right? It was really underbaked. I took it out of the oven way too early. And looking back, I think the big flaw in the original version of the memoir, aside from the fact that it was like 976 pages long or whatever it was that I didn't have enough mental space to write it. I didn't have enough distance between myself and the original experience. I mean, hiking the Pacific Crest Trail is a really big deal. It's monumental, and it takes a while to sort of see your way around the experience, especially if you want to write funny, which I did. I mean, you need a certain amount of perspective to write funny, especially if the memories in question weren't funny at all when you were going through them. I mean, I ran out of water. The reason why it's called the Cactus Eaters is because I got so desperate to get some water that I tried to chew a cactus, but I didn't take any of the spines out. So I chose that as a title because it seemed to kind of signify the lack of preparation for the whole trip. Anyway, and so I felt like I skipped a bunch of steps. I was so eager to sort of get the bragging rights to be published that I didn't really give it enough time. Also, I didn't have a writing group, which you have, so I was kind of writing into the void. It's really great that you're part of the Central Coast Writers because it's really important to write in community, right? I think it's really hard to be kind of a hermit writer and do that. It's really good to share your work with other people in a group setting, which I didn't do. I wasn't doing that at all. So I lacked perspective, hadn't really processed the memories as much as I needed to. So in the late 1990s, I ended up meeting and falling in love with another writer named Amy Ettinger. She also became a published writer later on. We met when we were both writers at the Santa Cruz Sentinel. I was the daily city reporter, just covering whatever weird stuff would happen. there'd be like topless protests and all kinds of wild stuff. And it's really funny because no matter what would happen at the city council meeting, they were just stone faced, right? They would just sit there and say next on the agenda. People would be show up in wild costumes, and they just never. They would. And anyhow, Amy was a freelance feature story writer, and fatefully, she was doing wedding announcements. So we ended up dating for a long time, and then we got married. And during that period of time, I joined a writing group. It doesn't have a name, unlike the Central Coast writers. But we would meet every couple of weeks, and I would hand them sections of the book, and that was humbling because sometimes it would go well, and sometimes it felt like my chapters were being put through like a meat grinder, in the nicest way possible, I thought. But my big breakthrough is I started emailing different sections of the book to my friend Peggy Townsend, who's a wonderful writer. Actually, would be a great person to speak here. She had this full career at the Santa Cruz Sentinel, and then she reinvented herself as a successful published mystery and suspense author. She's in her early 70s, and she's just getting started. She has a book that just came out called The Botanist's Assistant that got really, really good reviews. Anyway, I would email her sections of The Cactus Eaters, and she would tell me what she thought. And a lot of the improvements of the chapters were preemptive because if you know that you're showing your work to someone who's really discerning and really smart, you're going to make all these changes to it before they see it, And I always find that when I turn my work into a writing group, if I get it to the point where I feel like it's good enough where I don't know what they're going to say, right? I just really think, okay, this is my absolute best shot. I don't know what they're going to say. Then I've got a really good chance of learning from what they're going to say. If I turn it in and I know what all the weaknesses are, everybody operates differently, but I just know, I get this sinking feeling, and they all tell you, I think to myself, wow, I kind of wasted my time. I wasted their time. But I try to get it in as good a shape as possible, just because I knew that these smart, discerning, nice people would read it. The tricky part for any writing group is people need to be discerning, but they also need to be kind, right? Both those things are important, discerning and kind. Anyhow, Amy, after a while, said, why, your chapters are in pretty good shape, so why don't you quit your job at the Santa Cruz Sentinel and go to an MFA program, and we'll get this book into the best possible shape. Just push this to the absolute limit of how good this can be. And also at MFA, like get connections and learn about maybe doing some other projects and things. And I did not have much confidence back then, and I assumed every MFA program would reject me. I had that kind of a mindset, but I had a really supportive partner. She had enough faith in the both of us, so I did apply to various places, ended up getting a fellowship to Columbia University's program, and then I got a teaching fellowship, which was, I really didn't expect to get in. I remember throwing my application on the ground thinking, oh, I don't want to spend $50 on this application. But it ended up being a wonderful experience. And so we spent 3 years in New York City. And the other thing that's really great about doing the MFA program for us is we learned to hustle, because we were in New York City and we drove up there in our clunky little stick shift car. Neither one of us had jobs. We had Columbia's subsidized housing, but we didn't have jobs. So we had to hustle so hard. I remember driving across the George Washington Bridge and thinking, what the heck are we doing here? So, but immediately Amy got a job doing internal communications for the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I mean, she really, really hustled. And we both ended up working as a research assistant from a guy named Dan Okrent, who he is an author who did a wonderful book about prohibition in the United States. It's called Last Call. If you read that book, our research is in that book. And what was really great about working as a research assistant for Dan Okrent is then we got to learn research skills that we could apply to our own books. I mean, it was wild. I would either go through databases or go through libraries, but sometimes I'd be interviewing actual real people. Like I interviewed descendants of people who had rum running boats, where for a while there was this technology race between the law enforcement and these people during Prohibition, these people who would be transporting illegal liquor across state lines. And the boats would just get faster and faster. And lo and behold, I went to Long Island and they had some of those boats still there. So I took photographs for the author, and it was an amazing experience, right? I mean, it was hard. There were rats in the apartment, and there were rats sneaking through the door. There were gross New York stuff, and sometimes it felt like there'd be a certain amount of squalor that would sort of counterbalance the enchantment. That's just the life in New York. I mean, you'd go and see some amazing movie premiere, and then a rat would jump over your foot. Do a standing long jump over your foot. I remember it got to the point where anytime I'd do something really cool, I'd think, uh-oh, like I went to some premiere where George Clooney and Paul Newman were there, and I'm like, I was afraid to leave the theater. I thought, what is going to happen? To contradict just this, anyhow. So anyhow, I was able to turn the Cactus Eaters, that elephantine manuscript, into a nice, slender, manuscript. And I was able to, during an MFA reading, an agent was in the audience, and I just happened to be reading a funny section where every line made the audience laugh. And I just felt like I was doing really well, and the audience was right in my hands. One thing that's really cool about Columbia is they make you read out loud all over the place. They make you read in fancy schmancy places. They make you read at dive bars where there are hecklers. So I was really I was pretty polished as a reader. So I got an agent because I did well in that performance. And what's wild about the book industry, the publishing industry, is you take so long. I mean, I had this thing sitting under my desk for years. But then as soon as an agent's interested in you, everything accelerates, goes into warp speed. I remember her saying, well, Dan, what do you think about me sending this to Random House, blah, 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 blah. She gave me a list of all these heavy hitters. And I said, sounds good to me. And she said, good, because I've already sent it to all those people. And then it was just hideous. Then the no's came in. No, 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 no. To the point where I was down to one more publisher, which is HarperCollins. And I thought, I'm cooked. I'm cooked. But then I'm walking back to my rat-infested apartment. And my wife leans at the window. She says, you've got a contract on the table, because she'd been sneaking through my email. So and that's a great feeling. You think nobody can take that away from you. You get a contract on the table. You're a published writer. Doesn't care. It doesn't matter if you get shellacked in the reviews. You sell one copy. You're a published writer, and nobody can take that away from you. So that was an amazing feeling. It was amazing. So anyhow, because it's really weird how the publishing industry works. It's when the editors meet to discuss your work, they generally have to have a consensus, right? 100% consensus. It's like a jury or something. So I think one naysayer could conceivably torpedo your chances. So everybody said yes. Anyway, so I got a yes from HarperCollins, and then Cactus Eaters came out and sold well and got a lot of reviews, rather polarizing with readers. You go on Amazon, there's like 5 stars and 1-star reviews, and that's it. But I think the polarization didn't hurt me. The controversy seemed to spark more interest. It was a bestseller for a while. I got a track record. And so I had the opportunity then to do a second book that I knew would be able to come out in hardback. The problem is I had no ideas in my head at all. I had nothing but silly ideas from my agent. And lo and behold, my editor for the Cactus Eaters, Michael Signorelli, very young man at the time, said, why don't you do a history of recreational camping? History of recreational camping in the US. And because he's a camping obsessive, and he just thought that would be a really cool idea. And I thought, wow, I was really worried about writing a really dry history of camping, and I thought there'd be nothing to say about it. But eventually, with a lot of help from Amy, I figured that I could make this book part history and part memoir, right? So I think without any further ado, I'll show you my little slideshow about how I used some research to put that together. So how am I doing on time? 7 o'clock. Okay, so I've got half an hour? Okay. Let's do the slideshow. This is called, well, actually, I think there's 2 titles in this. Don't Fear the Research, How Musty Books, Databases, and Interviews with Experts Deepened My Second Memoir. Next slide, please. And this is the second title for this. Hiking Through History and Camping with Ghosts, How Dead People Can Add New Life to Travelogues, and how you can add life and interest to your creative nonfiction through research. All right. Next slide, please. I grew up camping but took it for granted. I thought I knew all there was to know about it. When a publisher approached me to write a participatory history of camping as a follow-up to my first book, The Cactus Eaters, my first reaction was puzzlement. History of camping, I had nothing to say about it. I thought it would be a pamphlet, right? Next slide. As far as I was concerned, camping was all about questionable water. This is an actual poorly punctuated sign. Water is not for drinking. May contain typical organisms. This is, of course, on the Pacific Crest Trail, where every water source is disgusting and full of gross stuff. Next slide, please. And questionable hygiene. That's my actual, that's me in the PCT. I actually got the trail name Dirty Dan for no surprising reasons. Next. Equally questionable camping foods was what I knew about. Hot tang. My dad would put the tang in the water that wasn't fully filtered, so there'd be little twigs floating around in it. Squeezed cheese, which is disgusting. Shelf-stable sausage, freeze-dried meatballs. Next slide. Not to mention freeze-dried eggs with bacon. Oh my goodness, look at that wrinkled package. It's bringing back memories for anybody. Next slide, please. And lots of bad photos featuring my dad's big orange finger blocking most of the snapshot. I had no idea that pleasure camping, as we now know it, only existed for the past 150 years. It's really like a 19th century kind of romantic invention, Victorian pastime that got way out of hand. The more I dug into camping history, the more I found out about the inherent strangeness of something that I used to take for granted. Next slide. Okay, to get an early sense of camping, I traveled and camped in places where this activity first became popular among well-heeled urban Northeasterners. In the old days of camping, the original campers were affluent people known as sports. They were intellectuals from the city, right? And they were scared to camp by themselves because they thought that the howling wilderness was going to kill them. So they'd hire wilderness guides to do all the work for them. They would camp with them, but in a sense, a wilderness guide would camp for you. They did everything. They did all of the donkey work. Campouts, and because these people did all the work for you, you could bring whatever you wanted. A lot of the original camping took place along waterways. So the wilderness guides would have these great big flat-bottomed guide boats that would take you where you wanted, right? And so you could bring your nicest suits. You could bring whiskey. You could bring whatever you wanted. And a tent, you didn't have to bring a tent because this is kind of horrifying, but back in those days, you would just go on your guidebook and point to a forest where you wanted to camp. And the guides, who were the local lumbermen, would take those trees there, slash the bark, which basically kills the tree, hack down the trees, and make these one-night, one-use, semi-rainproof shanties for you to sleep. There was no wilderness ethos back then. So this is kind of similar to what they call glamping now. Glamping, glamour camping. If you see someone who's glamour camping and you think they're inauthentic, actually the opposite is true. Glamour camping is the original camping in the US. I mean, of course, I'm talking about the original recreational camping. One reason why camping was so weird for fun in the US is, of course, that it's existed for millennia before. Indigenous populations used camping, survival adaptive camping, for hunting that have transportable shelters, and then later the mountain men, the pioneers. But the idea of doing it for fun, you would need to have some sort of philosophy that the city is going to grind you down, that the wilderness is a place of renewal, which was weird for Americans until the 19th century when they started to see forests getting chopped down, when you started to see people on office jobs, people getting worn out by bureaucratic living. So you needed that to happen for people to want to escape to the wilderness. Next slide, please. Neurasthenia. Okay, there was this trendy disease, this trendy mental disease in the 19th century called neurasthenia, where people felt like too much technology, too much time on the clock, sound familiar, made you miserable. Miserable office workers and brain workers felt estranged from nature, longing for an escape from neurasthenia, a term that entered the mass culture in 1969. Neurasthenia made people's teeth fall out, right? And gave them uncontrollable spasms. The condition was thought to be fatal Murder, suicide, and even a fatal submarine accident were blamed on neurasthenia. And this is a terribly drawn photo of someone with neurasthenia. Uh, the limb proportions are terrible. Like I just, even if you allow for foreshortening, you think neurasthenia has melted my limbs. Next slide, please. 1869 was also the year that put pleasure camping on the map because it was considered a cure for urban insanity, right? The Reverend William Adirondack Murray wrote the first best-selling camping book that led to the first U.S. camping craze. Way before Cheryl Strayed got the Pacific Crest Trail flooded with people, this guy wrote a book saying, you've got to go camping in the Adirondacks. It's amazing. It'll cure you. And he said, don't worry, it's not going to be hard. Other people will do the work for you. Don't worry. Next, next slide. Mitchell Sabattis. So these wilderness guides had amazing skills. This is an Abenaki man, Mitchell Sabattis. But those trips reduced the campers and those sports into a state of complete codependency, right? Other people would do all the work for them. This is way before the Boy Scouts, right? Okay, next slide. Black flies. Okay, you go to the Adirondacks in the wrong time, the black flies will eat you alive. They will bite you and they will create these puddles of blood and then they'll lick up the blood. So what happened was Adirondack Murray, the year that he said go to the Adirondacks, was a horrible season for black flies. They just nibbled people half to death. Next slide, please. Wilderness guides, they still exist in the Adirondacks. Joe Hackett, to this day, uses a hand-built 19th century rowboat for his campouts, which are extremely expensive. His waiting list is so long that someone would have to die to camp with, if you want to camp with him. But guides like Joe are now an endangered species in part because of, next slide please, survivalist campers. All right, these campers were rebellion against the guide system. These are the people who said, you can go out there and you can learn these survivalist skills on your own. Why be the middleman? Why not eliminate the middleman and you can be your own wilderness guide? And being your own wilderness guide and learning survival skills will be part of the fun. See, that was a reaction against the guide system. This guy, George Washington Sears, was one of the first ultralight pleasure campers heading out into the Adirondacks in a hand-built boat so lightweight that he could lift it with one arm. Next slide, please. Oh my gosh, okay. 1913, this guy is buck naked. Sorry if that's offensive, but Joe Knowles was America's first camping superstar. A century before Survivor and Naked and Afraid, Joe Knowles scandalized America and attracted thousands of fans by attempting to camp buck naked for 2 months in the Maine woods. You've probably never heard of this guy, so it shows you how fickle fame can be. So this whole thing was he went out there and he said, I'm going to survive on my own. Just put me out there naked. I'll be fine. Next slide, please. There he is, breaking the last link, entering the woods at the foot of Spencer Trail on 1913. Okay, next slide, please. So to pay tribute to Joe Knowles in this book, I decided that I would go out exactly 100 years after his camp out. I would go out into mountain lion territory in the Santa Cruz Mountains and I would camp naked. With nothing, no flashlight, nothing. I would just put my clothes on at the side of the trail and I would go out there and just survive. With no clothes, no gear, I had to improvise. This was the shelter I made. It's just basically a whole bunch of redwood needles. Those are my feet sticking out of it. It was very scratchy. I trained with a modern day survivalist, but here's the thing. Joe Knowles claimed that he lasted a couple years out there. I couldn't last one night because I camped on top of what turned out to be, next slide please, a yellow jacket's nest. So yellow jackets, their nests aren't really nests. They're more of like crevices, like an absence, right? So I got stung by 4 or 5 of them and I'm pretty susceptible to the venom. And so my entire night was very scratchy and uncomfortable. So I was gonna stay out there indefinitely and eating redwood sorrel, which is a very bitter tasting plant that disagrees with you if you eat too much of it. And I ended up hiking out the very next day. Bad for life, good for story, as they say. Next slide, please. So anyway, the use of history research in travel narratives. Now, I think if you're doing an adventure like this is also true for my first book, for the Pacific Crest Trail book, I would try to avoid a trudge by trudge account of an adventure by adding pieces of research to take you away from some of the personal stuff, right? Next slide, please. Now, one of the things that's really hard about using research in a novel or a memoir is tone. You don't want to have like this lilting, fun tone in your book, and then suddenly you get to the research and it's like Wikipedia or worse, like Chat GPT. Inconsistent tone will take the reader right out of the book. So here, do you know what I do if I have a piece of research that I want to incorporate into a memoir or fiction? I will memorize it, and then I will kind of spit it back onto the page as if I'm talking about it in a bar or something. It'll be really, really informal. And then I will check back and see if I made a mistake. But I'll try to commit it to memory first, because that way I'm telling another story. Research, if you get it right, is just another story that you're telling. Another big pratfall for research is what I call ASORs, apocryphal stories often retold. If you hear a story that's too cutesy or clever or convenient, it's probably BS, right? Anything that seems too good to be true probably is. Next slide, please. Is that the last slide? Oh, yeah. Instead of just writing about getting lost in the woods with my family, that's Julianne and Amy, I could delve into the origin stories of camping in its many forms. For example, long before there was van life, there was, next slide, caravan life. That is an RV from 1880. People are wearing kilts. I think they got bagpipes. This is an English land yacht. And as you can see, it's got some things in common if you think about it with today's RV. I mean, a little bit. Next slide, please. So toggling back and forth from the present day to 100 years ago allows me to examine the differences and shocking similarities between camping back then and camping now. For instance, motorhomes are no more complicated than they were a century ago. Here is a 21st century Class A motorhome, hard to drive, impossible to park. And, next slide, please. Can you believe this thing? Long before there were Winnebagos, there was the Conklin family gypsy van of 1915. It weighed 8 tons. It had showers. It had hot showers. It had an onboard dance floor. It had an observation deck, and it had onboard steel and plank bridges for potholes. What's really weird is that a lot of RVs preceded the highway system, so you'd have the crappiest roads, and they'd be sharing roads with horse-drawn wagons, right? Next chapter. John Muir and Teddy Roosevelt went on a now legendary camping trip together in Yosemite in 1903, but if they'd waited a few years, this is amazing, but if they'd waited 7 years, they could have gone RVing together. RVing has existed in America since 1910. Seriously. Reckoning with camping's sexist history, a century before Cheryl Strayed, wild Victorian ladies conquered the woods at a time when prevailing women's fashions emphasized bulky and concealing garments, including whalebone corsets. Women still flocked to the mountains. Look at this woman who's going deer hunting, climbing a vertical cliff. Look at those hobnail boots and the dress. Guns, daggers, and bug powder. Early female campers often carried weapons so they could deal with mountain lions and male humans. They also used pepper spray and bug powder to subdue their assailants. This is Helga Estby and her daughter Clara, who walked across the country in 1895, camping as they went. Yeah, they were badasses, these people. Early car camping, humans battling nature. They were horrible roads, no rules, no rescue. There were flash floods, angry farmers, because they hadn't really worked out where you should or shouldn't camp. There weren't campgrounds, so you just camp wherever, and then a guy would come out there saying, "What are you doing on my land?" Vicious wildlife. And tornadoes. As I said, cars preceded decent roads. Cars preceded the highway system. Cars preceded car camping. Next. And times have changed, but challenges remain. Like I tried to camp at Mineral King, California, and there still is a horrible road going up to Mineral King that's just about as bad as what you'd get in the 1900s. And the weirdest thing about camping in Mineral King, do you all know about what the marmots do to your cars there? Marmots will eat, they will drink the coolant in your car, and it doesn't kill them. No. Um, and nobody seems to quite understand why this is true. But when you go to Mineral King, you go to the top of Mineral King, you'll see the parking lots. Everybody has put like these tarps all across the tops and bottoms of the car, and they've bungee corded in there. It looks like the entire car is wearing like a diaper. And the reason why is if you leave your car out for even a second too long, a marmot will jump under the guts of the car and drink the coolant and render your car. Good luck getting AAA at the top of that mountain. So we went there and we were kind of joking about it, and lo and behold, a marmot came racing up to my car, jumped underneath it. And so we were like banging the car and knocking against it. And finally, my daughter did the marmot dance. She went out there and she kind of did this marmot dance, and for some reason, lo and behold, the marmot left our car. Just by magic, because my daughter did the marmot dance. I swear I saw this happen. This is all in the book. Next slide. Future challenges and narrative possibilities. The other things I tried to explore it Under the Stars, is the whole idea of loving the woods to death, how to illustrate this in a participatory format. Like leave no trace, do people respect leave no trace? For one chapter, this is the chapter I got the most publicity about, but for one chapter called The Immaculator, what I did was I climbed Mount Whitney, and I'd heard that they had a wag bag system where people would put human waste in these wag bags and they would hike out with them. That they're supposed to hike out with them. You're not supposed to leave them in the woods, right? So I decided that I would get this big tube, and if everybody respected leave no trace rules, my tube would be empty. But if people violated leave no trace woods and left their disgusting wag bags on the ground, I would be inundated by these waste products. Guess which happened? What do you think? Yes, I'm so sorry to report the latter. I was absolutely inundated with wag bags. I mean, people are slobs. It's sad, but so anyway, so that way I could dramatize leave no trace practices to make it kind of interesting and funny and suspenseful for readers without being, well, I guess it's a little bit preachy. Next slide, please. That might be. Okay, a few words about the asset of research. Motivate your research for your books. A is for argument and authority. You can bolster your argument and build your authority by quoting from the argument of those who came before you. C is for context. Research will help make sure you're situating your family history within a broader context. I is for illustration. Historical archives are a wonderful source of diagrams, political cartoons, and photographs you can fold into your work, often for a fee. I mean, a lot of the illustrations for Under the Stars, I had to pay to use them, which is fine. It was part of my advanced budget. And D is for dialogue. If you delve deeply into someone's biographies and writings, you can quote them. You can stage a conversation with them on the page, or even curate a conversation between sources. Next slide, please. Is that the last one? And consider your sources. If you're associated with a university or know someone who is, you can get access to incredible databases that have scans of historical newspapers going back as early as the 18th century. JSTOR, as many of you know, is a great clearinghouse for scholarly published works. Also, just family archivists, figure out who your family historian is and talk to them, get their letters and papers. Next slide. Yeah, I think, so anyhow, next slide. Okay, the bottom line is have fun with these products, these writing and research projects. The more you learn about any topic, the more fascinating it becomes. I honestly felt like there would be nothing to say about camping before I started. And the more I delved into it, the more the subject kind of opened up and the weirder and stranger and funnier it became. Like, it's just so strange that you would hire someone to camp for you. At this point today, you'd think, why would you do that? Like, and this is just like a regular camping trip, right? And then the whole idea of the Boy Scouts. The Boy Scouts emerged as also as part of the rebellion against the guide system. Let's see. So, do I have time to read a brief history a brief history about s'mores? Do I have like 10? Yeah. Okay. Great. All right. I want to end with a brief history of s'mores. If I could just find it in here. Awkward pause as I find s'mores. Oh, I forgot. I have a really nice s'more. 120. Okay. Great. Okay. So what I also did is I broke up the book by having heroes of camping that I would break out. And one of the heroes of camping I had was the s'more, because it's kind of heroic when you think about it. One of my proudest camping moments involved an elderly French lady who wandered into my Sierra Nevada car camp one night in high heels with clanking jewelry and a fruity perfume. She wanted to know why I was squishing flame-roasted marshmallows against a cracker with Hershey's chocolate. The woman had a disapproving look, and I could not understand one word she was saying, but she communicated her thoughts with frantic hand gestures. If memory served, this woman was wearing Chanel and foundation makeup on National Forest land. When I gave her her first taste of s'mores, she fell apart. Fondant, she shouted as she jumped around the campfire. Fondant, fondant, fondant. The woman just about cleared me out of my jet puffed marshmallows that night. I owe that rapturous moment to the Girl Scouts who gave the world the first and most popular recipe for some s'mores, right? In a 1927 Girl Scout manual, Tramping and Trailing with the Girl Scouts, the candy sandwich was a standout in a cooking section that included a baleful concoction called the Spotted Dog, consisting of mushy brown rice, water, salt, and seeded raisins. Like all the other recipes, aside from s'mores in this book, were disgusting. The original Girl Scout s'more recipe calls for 16 graham crackers, 8 bars of plain chocolate, and 16 marshmallows. Toast 2 marshmallows over the coals to a crisp, gooey state, and then put them inside a graham cracker and chocolate bar sandwich. No one seems to know if the Girl Scouts devised the recipe themselves. At the time the guidebook came out, the combination of ingredients was well known to the American public, and the Malamar cookie, which came out in 1913, and the moon pie, which are these sort of proto-s'mores, 1917. I like to think that the clever and joyous Girl Scouts pioneered the idea of applying heat. After all, this organization was well versed in the art of improvisation and repurposing. These are the same kids who hoarded peach pits to be used in American soldiers as gas masks in World War I. The burnt pits were turned into a special charcoal that was placed in the masks and mixed with anti-gas chemicals. Let's face it, if there was no such thing as a s'more, the graham cracker would have no right to exist. Graham cracker pie crust does not count. It falls apart, tastes like sawdust, while compromising the cracker's one redeeming virtue, its ability to serve as an architectural support for a marshmallow. These days, if you were to go online and type s'mores and orgasm into a search engine, you would get 174,000 results with findings such as s'mores cookie equals orgasm in Pyrex and Ben & Jerry's s'mores equals edible orgasm. Which is strange because the graham cracker was invented by an American Presbyterian minister and joyless food activist named Sylvester Graham. He was either the inventor of or the inspiration behind the graham cracker. Whether or not he baked the wafer that bears his name is open to question, but it was originally produced with health principles in mind. At the very least, Graham, the most influential health food diet proponent of the early 19th century, came up with the idea of a cracker that was coarsely ground, made out of unbolted wheat and a little molasses or sugar. The texture was gritty and rough, but it was not supposed to be pleasant at all. Graham thought that eating a gruel or cracker made from his farinaceous flour would stop young males from a bad habit that would drain their spinal marrow, give them apoplexy, cause their teeth to drop out, and make their lithe young bodies dwarfish and crooked. Graham himself, however, was the product of unbearable urges. He had 16 brothers and sisters. This did not stop him from preaching his message to anyone who would listen. Strange as his beliefs may seem now, he was not considered a freak, nor were his views spontaneous or original. It appears that Graham was an admirer of a book, Onania, or the heinous sin of self-pollution and its frightful consequences. One of the first places to serve the graham cracker was Oberlin College. Starting in the 1830s, school staff offered the flavorless wafer along with fruit, gruel, rice, and vegetables, all washed down with ice-cold water, Coincidentally, in another bit of graham cracker American camping history, John Muir subsisted on graham crackers when he was an impoverished college student in Wisconsin during the 1860s. These graham cracker dinners in Oberlin, they were so disgusting that the kids, the dinners were disgusting and the dinners were revolting, and so were the students. The students staged an insurrection. They charged out of the cafeteria, and despite the administration, gorged themselves on red meat they stole from a private boarding house. These rebellious scholars prevailed. The college discontinued the Sylvester Graham-inspired regimen after finding it inadequate to the demands of the human system as was presently developed. While Graham had followers, he was also controversial, and some of the backlash against him was borderline violent. He was so passionate about home ground whole wheat and spoke so stridently against the evils of pure white flour that one of his speeches in Boston, a group of bakers rioted and dumped loads of whole wheat flour on all of the people lined up to hear Graham's lecture. Am I out of time? Yeah, okay. So I will end on that revolting note. But thank you so much. And do I have time for questions? Any question that you might have? Yeah, oh yes, hi. Joe Knowles, I don't know. I think he's still okay. It's just a few years ago, but I don't know. I need to check up on him. It's been a while. So I don't know the answer to your question. Yeah, yeah, I sure hope so too. The wilderness guides themselves, they still can be found in the Adirondacks. Yes. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I think if you're camping with little equipment, it's just really important to have a lot of preparation. I feel like the more you know what you're doing, the less you can bring, right? It's really great to go light if you can get away with it, if you can. So I say more power to them because it's more comfortable when you're trekking, but I just hope that they stay warm. That's all. Yes. Well, a few things have happened since the book came out. Tragically, my wife passed away 2 years ago. She's only 48. She had a very rare form of cancer, and so I am camping. I've been camping a little bit with my teenage daughter, and my daughter is 17 years old. But I think that I got a little bit camped out from this book. I mean, I camped so much. I mean, my late wife Amy did a book called Sweet Spot about the history of ice cream, and by the time she finished that book, she was all done with ice cream. No, but I have gone camping a few times with my daughter, and I'll continue to do so. I mean, I have done very little car camping until my daughter was born, right? I grew up backpacking, that was my dad was really into, and so, but I've done a little bit of car camping as well as I've gone back to the John Muir Trail with my kiddo. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I you know I just have to qualify everything. Um, like there's this one story that I had about the person I showed you a slide of named George Washington Sears, who had a boat called the Sari Gamp, which was this boat that he piloted in the Adirondacks, and he supposedly named it after a Charles Dickens character who was drunk all the time because the boat would take no water. And I don't know, it's a little cutesy for me. I put it in the book with some qualification. I said, as the story goes, but just anything. I mean, it's like I went to a Bigfoot conference, and everything I didn't believe anything that anybody said. I don't know if they answer the question at all, but if you hear, I think if you have this internal BS detector that makes you think this is probably not true, then you should check it out. Double check. Yes. Let's see. Well, my editor is Michael Signorelli, and so what happens is when the book gets published, when selected for publication, they have a board of editors who work on the book, and there's one editor who's appointed to work with you. So Michael was just appointed by HarperCollins to work with me, and we became kind of friends. I mean, for Under the Stars, he actually has a cameo. I camp with him in the Adirondacks in Under the Stars. And then now he changed. Now he changed to a literary agent. He's an agent now. Any other questions? Yes.
Well, I'm too old to do it.
Yeah.
A lot of younger writers would probably love it if you had like a weekend seminar. I don't know if you'd call it a seminar or a camp out in the woods. You and over here and some of the younger ones.
Yeah.
And do it right there and tell your stories and everything. And also have the right, around the campfire, you're cleaning the floor, whatever you're going to do.
Your idea is great.
You're writing to each other by candlelight.
Yeah, you have a great idea. I did a miniature version of that where we all went hiking in a meadow in Santa Cruz, and in typical fashion, I got everybody lost. But we hiked and we wrote and we ate a little sandwich, and it was fun. It was organized through Bookshop Santa Cruz. It was cool. It was just after the Cactus Eaters came out.
I think it's a wonderful idea. I will add, make it very expensive.
So I'll just be rolling in dough afterwards.
They charge $1,000 for a weekend for certain poetry seminars.
I know.
Fill it. And I thought, here I'm a poet. Poetry is a gift, and I give it freely.
Yes, you do.
I don't charge $1,000.
You should.
I don't charge anything.
Yeah. You make a good point about how expensive these conferences are. It's true. It's ridiculous. Yeah.
Make it just really, make it at least $500 or something.
Oh yeah.
And I think you'd have a wonderful time.
That's a really interesting idea. I really love your idea. I love your idea. I think that's great. I believe.
Might even go for one day.
Yeah. You should.
I'm not going to sleep where I might get yellow jackets.
Oh yeah, you got to avoid the stinking yellow jackets. Well, thank you all so very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I have books to sign. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yes, I just read about that.
One of my favorite reads last
Yeah, I read about that. About the Grand
I just
Canyon.
want to disconnect you here.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming.
I'm not a member yet.
Right.
I thought was that if it's possible, acceptable, to meet with you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you either have it or you don't. And it's one of those things, if you can't do it well, don't even bother. It's so funny, yeah. Yeah. Hi. I think I just see you out of the way. No worries. I didn't even, you faked it very well. He said I hadn't written anything new. Oh, thank you. I hadn't written anything new in so long. It felt strange to write something new. I've been in that book for so long. I think I could say some of the chapters by heart.
I just want to say goodbye.
Hey, good to see you. We're always in the same places. I know. Think about it. Right. I'm sorry, that's why yeah, so I'll do it again. I'll do more nonfiction, definitely.
So, Jane, Elizabeth, you know now, Elizabeth is the reason we got this.
Well, welcome to you anyway. Yes, well, this was so amazing. I absolutely loved it. Well, I just told you about I've been reading this book, How He Injects Humor. And it's like Nancy says, either you have it or you don't. But that's something I struggle with, how to inject humor. It makes such a difference. And also, that consistent voice throughout, even if you're moving between, you know, the research and the memoir or the narrative. So that was, it's part of my brain.
Larry's already taken off. He doesn't like groups, so I gotta go. All right, we'll talk about it.
I'll be in touch. Thank you for introducing me. I appreciate it.
Gotta make you feel welcome.
It was so nice to see you.
With this area. And then I was just looking at the newsletter, and I had nothing to do with the newsletter. And the big
Advertising the season, what moves us.